You've probably opened a brand new bag of Lay's, looked deep inside the shiny abyss, and wondered if you somehow accidentally bought a bag of expensive, potato-scented breathing oxygen. We have absolutely all been there. You are standing in the middle of the grocery store, staring at the snack aisle. You grab a brightly colored bag of chips that looks plump, firm, and full of salty, carbohydrate promise. It feels like a very solid financial investment. You proudly carry it home, eagerly tear open the foil, and then, bam. Absolute betrayal. You look inside, and more than half the bag is completely, utterly empty. It feels like a massive corporate conspiracy. It feels like the snack executives at Frito-Lay are sitting in a dark, incredibly well-funded boardroom somewhere, laughing maniacally as they charge you $4 for a handful of thinly sliced potatoes and a whole lot of nothing. It is incredibly frustrating, and if you are anything like a normal, snack-eating human being, you have probably felt scammed. But as it turns out, you aren't being scammed at all. That vast, empty space is actually a marvel of modern food engineering, and if it wasn't there, your entire snacking experience would be a miserable, soggy, crumb-filled nightmare. First of all, the most important thing to know is that the air inside your bag of Lay's is not actually air. If it were the exact same air that you and I are breathing right now, those chips would be absolutely ruined before they even made it onto the delivery truck. The normal atmosphere around us is made up of about 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen, plus a little bit of other random trace gases. And while oxygen is fantastic for keeping human beings alive, it is the absolute mortal enemy of a potato chip. When the fats and oils in a freshly fried potato chip are exposed to oxygen, they undergo a chemical process called lipid oxidation. In normal, non-science terms, this means the chips go stale, turn rancid, and start tasting like a damp cardboard box that has been sitting in a humid basement since 2012. It is the exact same reason an apple slice turns brown when you leave it on the kitchen counter, just way less visible and significantly worse tasting. So, to prevent this tragedy, snack manufacturers use a process called nitrogen flushing. Just before the bag is sealed shut at the factory, a machine blasts the inside of the foil wrapper with a highly concentrated puff of pure nitrogen gas, instantly pushing all the oxygen and moisture out. Nitrogen is what we call an inert gas. This means it is incredibly lazy and doesn't chemically react with the food at all. It just hangs out in there, completely odorless, completely tasteless, and perfectly harmless, quietly keeping your chips crispy, fresh, and free of weird basement flavors for months at a time. So, that explains the weird gas. But it doesn't quite explain why there is so incredibly much of it. I mean, theoretically, they could just flush the bag with nitrogen and then vacuum seal it tightly to the chips, right? Just shrink wrap the whole thing. Well, no. If they did that, you wouldn't be buying potato chips. You would be buying heavily seasoned potato dust. The second, arguably more crucial reason your Lay's bag is inflated like a tiny, metallic balloon is to act as a literal, functional airbag. Think about the absolutely brutal journey a single potato chip takes. It gets dumped from a massive industrial fryer onto a metal conveyor belt, shoved rapidly into a bag, dropped from a height into a cardboard box, stacked heavily onto a wooden pallet, loaded onto the back of a semi-truck, driven across the country over terrible potholes, aggressively stocked onto a supermarket shelf by an underpaid teenager, and finally tossed carelessly into your grocery bag right underneath a 2-liter bottle of Diet Coke. Without that highly pressurized, protective pocket of nitrogen, every single delicate chip inside that bag would be crushed into a fine, UN-dippable powder before it ever reached your mouth. The snack industry actually has a very official, very boring name for this empty space. They call it slack fill. Subscribe to Almost Dead YouTube channel. Anyway, back to the chips. You might be sitting there thinking, well, what about Pringles? They don't have all that stupid air, and they manage to not get crushed. And you would be absolutely right. But Pringles are playing a completely different game. Pringles are not technically sliced potatoes. They are a dehydrated potato mush that is formed into a uniform hyperbolic paraboloid shape, which is just a very fancy math term for a saddle. Because every single Pringle is the exact same, mathematically perfect shape, they can be perfectly stacked inside a rigid, heavy-duty cardboard tube. The tube itself provides the structural protection, so they don't need a nitrogen airbag. But traditional Lay's are just sliced, whole potatoes, which means every single chip naturally curls up into a completely random, chaotic shape when it hits the hot oil. You cannot physically stack them. They are basically an anarchist geometry experiment. So, a soft foil bag combined with a giant nitrogen cushion is the only mathematically viable way to transport them without turning them into breadcrumbs. This slack fill is completely intentional, and more importantly, it is highly regulated by the government. In the United States, the Food and Drug Administration actually has extremely strict laws regarding empty space in packaging. If a company leaves a bunch of empty space in a package just to trick you into thinking you are buying more stuff than you actually are, that is legally classified as non-functional slack fill, and it is highly illegal. You can literally get sued for it. And in fact, people have tried. There have been dozens of angry, class action lawsuits filed against companies like Frito-Lay by consumers claiming they were financially damaged by the empty space in their chip bags. People have seriously marched into a court of law to argue about potato chip air. But the chip companies almost always win these lawsuits. Why? Because the FDA explicitly allows for slack fill if it serves a legitimate, functional purpose. And protecting fragile potato wafers from becoming a fine potato sand is legally considered a highly functional purpose. So, scientifically and legally, the air is completely justified. But maybe you are still feeling a little bit ripped off. After all, your eyes see a giant bag, and your brain naturally expects a giant volume of food. But here is the ultimate twist of the potato chip economy: you are not actually buying volume. Look closely at the bottom corner of any chip bag in the world, and you will see the net weight printed right there in grams and ounces. The highly automated machine that fills the bags at the factory isn't measuring how full the bag looks. It is dropping an exact, federally mandated, highly accurate weight of chips into every single package. If the bag says you are getting 180 grams of potato chips, you are getting exactly 180 grams of potato chips, regardless of whether the bag is the size of a standard cereal box or a king-sized sleeping bag. The company isn't secretly shortchanging you on potatoes, they are just giving you a highly engineered, oversized container to protect the exact amount of potatoes you already paid for. But the incredible engineering doesn't even stop there. Because this puffed-up bag of nitrogen actually creates a fascinating logistical nightmare for chip manufacturers, specifically when it comes to basic geography and physics. Atmospheric pressure changes depending on your altitude. If you manufacture a bag of Lay's at sea level in New Jersey, the pressure inside the bag perfectly equals the heavy air pressure outside the bag. Everything is perfectly balanced. But if you take that exact same bag, put it on a truck, and drive it up into the Rocky Mountains to sell in a place like Denver, Colorado, the outside air pressure significantly drops. Because the pressure inside the sealed bag is now much higher than the thin mountain air outside of it, the bag will begin to forcefully expand. If there is too much nitrogen inside the bag to begin with, the bag will literally pop open like a balloon in the back of the truck before it ever reaches the grocery store. Imagine a truck driver hauling 20,000 bags of sour cream and onion over a mountain pass, and suddenly the back of the truck sounds like a terrifying, high-stakes war zone of popping foil. It is a very real, very expensive problem. To solve this, chip companies actually have to precisely adjust the exact amount of nitrogen slack fill based on exactly where the chips are being shipped. Or, they have to manufacture special, reinforced bags specifically designed for high-altitude markets. There are literal, highly educated scientists whose entire, full-time job is to calculate the absolute perfect ratio of nitrogen gas to potato to atmospheric pressure, just so you can absent-mindedly eat a salty snack while binge-watching a show on Netflix. So, the next time you rip open a fresh bag of Lay's and sigh dramatically at the massive, dark cavern of empty space staring back at you, don't think of it as a greedy corporate scam. Think of it as a meticulously calculated, scientifically proven, legally defended preservation chamber. You aren't paying for empty air. You are paying for the incredibly complex guarantee that your chips are actually intact chips, and not a handful of stale, sad, oxidized crumbs. Which is great, because the only thing worse than an empty chip bag is having to eat a potato with a spoon.